Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday.
Hello students, today we are going to discuss about mixed methods and its part 2. So let's begin with the conditions when to use the mixed method. So there are various conditions. Number 1, to verify or confirm the results obtained from the other method. When one needs to use one method to inform another method. When both quantitative and qualitative data together provide a better understanding of the research problem. So number 1, which is one of the most important conditions to use the mixed method. So to verify or confirm the results obtained from the other method, in mixed method the researcher has to use or employ two methods simultaneously, the quantitative and qualitative method. If the researcher firstly used a quantitative method, then he has to gather all the data quantitatively or using the quantitative method. Then he has to analyze it, then he has to interpret all the things and all the data. Then lastly he has to come to the conclusion part. So that results or that conclusions can be verified and confirmed by using the qualitative method also. So both are complementary to each other. Then when one needs to use one method to inform another method, so using mixed method, this will help the researcher to know the both sides and both aspects of a research problem, that is qualitative aspect or qualitative side and quantitative aspect or quantitative side of a research problem. Then when both quantitative and qualitative data together provide a better understanding of the research problem, if the researcher thinks or observes that both the quantitative and qualitative method will help him to know and to have a better understanding of the research problem, then he can use the mixed method research design. Then when one type of research is not enough to address the research questions, in that case the researcher can also use the mixed method if he thinks that single method will not going to help him to address the research questions or the objectives and the research problem comprehensively. Next, when one wants to develop a theory about a phenomenon of interest and then test it. So when the researcher wants to develop a theory of a phenomenon of his interest and then he wants to test it, then he can use the quantitative and qualitative method to verify, to confirm, to test the various variables and data of his research problem. Then next, to generalize findings from qualitative research, the mixed method can also be used in a qualitative research. When the researcher gets the qualitative analysis or qualitative conclusions of his research problem, then he also can use the quantitative method to generalize the qualitative aspect of the research problem. Next, there are various types or designs of mixed methods. The first one is the explanatory sequential design. So in this design, the researcher begins with the collection and analysis of the quantitative data. This is the first stage. After that, in the second phase, he or she collects and analyzes the qualitative data. So in this type of design, the researcher begins with the collection and analysis of the quantitative data. That means this is the first stage of his data collection phase. So in that phase, he firstly used the quantitative method to gather or collect the quantitative data. Then he analyze it. After analyzing the quantitative data, next he employs the qualitative method, where he has to use the qualitative methods to gather or collect the qualitative data and he analyze it qualitatively. Next, the advantage and disadvantages of the explanatory sequential method. Number 1, easy to implement because the steps fall into two separate stages. The design is easy to describe and it helps the researcher to write a comprehensive report. Both the data are collected, analyzed and interpreted in a systematic way. So number one, easy to implement because the steps fall into two separate stages. This is in this type of design, it's very easy for the researcher because the phases are divided into two, the first phase and the second phase. In the first phase he has to use the quantitative method, and the second phase he has to use the qualitative method. Next, the design is easy to describe. It's very easy to describe, and it helps the researcher to write a comprehensive report because he is using the two method policy, quantitative and qualitative. So all the data or the variables will be in the quantitative aspect and the qualitative aspect. So this will help him to write a comprehensive report or intensive report. Both the data are collected, analyzed and interpreted in a systematic way. So from the first stage of the research, the researcher has to use the methodological systematic way or the detailed systematic way to gather the data or analyze the data and to the interpretation part. So this is a very systematic way to reach to the conclusion of his research problem. Then what are the disadvantages? Number one, two phases require lengthy time to get implemented. It needs more time to reach to the conclusion part. Secondly, must decide criteria for selecting the participants. In this method, that means the explanatory sequential method, he has to finalize or he has to list out the criteria for selecting his samples, because in this type of design he has to use two methods of data collection, first quantitative then qualitative. Then he has to use the criteria, he has to list out the criteria for selecting the samples. The next, need to contact participants for second round of data collection, because there are two phases or two stages in the data collection. Firstly, he has to go for collecting the quantitative data, and next he has to go for the qualitative data. So these are the sources. Happy Independence Day. Thank you.